What's going on here? Okay. I thought I was completely offline that whole time I was talking. Okay, so we were talking yesterday, and we said today we'd cover COP28 and all the crazy stuff that happened at COP28, and it's still ongoing, by the way. This is nuts. I'm going to give you a little overview because there's so much to cover that I don't even know where to start. There's so much madness that's been going on. So I'll give you a little overview, and then we'll pick and choose some of the juiciest bits then. So we had a pretty comedic start to the opening by the president of COP28, who is also the CEO of a massive oil company. This is not a joke. This is actually genuine. Their main target this year at COP28 is to look at how they can bring down GHGs, greenhouse gas emissions, on food. They need to bring it down by 1/3 across all food. Good luck with that. We also had, this is the biggest carbon footprint COP event in history because there were so many private jets that flew in. We're going to get into who flew. Even some people, apparently, this is what they've said, that work in the same office took separate private jets. I mean, this is the insanity of this thing. And Rishi Sunak is committing for the UK to compensate other countries for reparations for climate stuff over the last while. So we've got a lot going on here. We got a lot going on, so let's jump straight in. Thanks for letting me know everyone can hear me okay. Good. No bad language was heard. Great, that's wonderful. I'm happy to hear that. So let's start with the amazing beginning then, and that was Sultan Al Jaber, the president of COP28 and the CEO of the UAE's state oil company, ADNOC. He said, and he said this, there's no scientific basis for needing to phase out fossil fuels to limit global heating, and then there's another one that says global boiling to 1.5 degrees. He argues that phasing out fossil fuels would hinder sustainable development and regress society and take the world back into caves. This is one of his opening statements, and again, there's a mix between his opening statements and what was said in response to being questioned. Now, let's have a look then at some of the details behind this. He claimed there's no science indicating that a phase out of fossil fuels is needed to reduce global heating to 1.5 degrees. He also said it would not allow sustainable development unless you want to take the world back into caves. His comments were incredibly concerning and verging on climate denial. We love this word, don't we? Climate denial, scientists said, and they were at odds with the position of the UN Secretary General Antonio. Well, we know all about him anyway. We've talked about him before and the biases that are surrounding him. But just realize what this Sultan Al Jaber is saying. He's saying, because I've seen a lot of people misunderstanding this, he's saying there's no science indicating a phase out of fossil fuels is needed to restrict global heating to 1.5. So he's not saying that he thinks the whole thing's a sham. He's basically specifically talking about the fossil fuel aspect, because I saw some memes going around this week saying that he thinks the whole thing's a big scam. I've looked at some of his videos and stuff. I don't think that's what he is saying at all. So he was challenged by the chair of the Elders Group and a former UN Special Envoy for Climate Change. As well as running COP28, he's the chief executive of the oil company, which many observers see as a serious conflict of interest. Really? Just a few people see that as a conflict of interest? Wow. Okay, so this is what got into this big heated debate then. He says, please help me, show me the roadmap for a phase out of fossil fuel that will allow for, again, key distinction here, sustainable socio-economic development, unless you want to take the world back into caves. So he's really talking about a lot of the developing economies here. And he's asking how exactly you're going to help the developing economies without hindering their growth, is what I'm interpreting his message to say. I don't think you will be able to help solve the climate problem by pointing fingers or contributing to the polarization and the divide that is already happening in the world. Show me the solutions, stop the pointing of fingers. That's actually what he said if you wanted to know the full details. So let's move on now then to the private jets. I mean, this is staggering, actually. This is absolutely staggering, the numbers on this. This was the biggest influx of private jets to any climate conference in the world, in history. This has been in history. And we look at who actually flew in then. Let's use some high-profile people you'll know. King Charles took his own private jet. Kamala Harris, own private jet. Emmanuel Macron, Rishi Sunak. Here's the thing I find interesting. Rishi Sunak and David Cameron both flew separate private jets within 30 minutes of each other, and apparently they're saying are going to return the same time. We don't know if that's true or not. Maybe they've got different schedules. But I find that quite interesting. And Rishi responded to the criticism, and he said it was powered by green aviation fuel. I had to highlight that because, I'm sorry, there's no such thing as far as I'm aware. Please drop in the chat if I'm mistaken here. I don't believe there's any such thing as green aviation fuel. If you know that there is, please put it in the chat, because I would love to research this green aviation fuel. As far as I'm aware, there isn't one. So that's it. Case closed. He said it's green, so everyone said, oh, well, there you go. So last year's COP27 saw 315 private jets. It says despite Etihad Airways offering to fly delegates using zero net emissions. So that was last year. And then this year they offered again. Yeah, these three jets all came from the same London airport as well, for the King, Rishi Sunak and David Cameron. But they're saying this year saw a lot more, but they won't actually say the number. They won't say the number. It says, and I'm going to read and quote from this, a larger number of private jets. And I love the follow-up to this, possibly related to COP28. So they have this normal, ebbs and flows of private jets going into the airport. And this time around, let's just say it was double last year, because there was double the amount of attendees. So last year was 315. This year was 630. Let's just throw that number out there. I've seen numbers up to 1,000. The irony of it, these people flying in on private jets, taking their own private jets halfway across the world to then say, hey, you guys need to cut your carbon emissions. The irony of it, the hypocrisy of it is bewildering. And then we have Rishi that came on to talk about compensation, reparations. He doesn't say how it's going to be funded. Let me tell you how this will be funded. It will be funded by UK taxpayers, because remember, the government doesn't have money. The government doesn't make money. So where does the money come from? It comes from taxpayers. And whenever the government does take control of things and industry and things like that, what do you see? You see catastrophes. We were talking about Venezuela over the last week, weren't we? And look what's happened in Venezuela. So the UK is going to start compensating poorer countries for climate impacts. He announced this at the summit in Dubai. I want to get on to what's happened with Putin as well, because this was absolute trolling. It's so wild what happened. But apparently Sunak did this big announcement. He wanted to make this big statement, show everybody. I guess it was, as they do, they go there and they, they're virtue signaling. Look at me, look how great, look what I'm announcing. So he's announcing 1.6 billion in climate funding from the UK as well for clean energy projects and additional. Again, we talked about this yesterday. That's all good, well and good, great. The more energy, the better an economy can develop. And does it matter if it's diversified energy? I don't really think so as much as they do. But he's also announced a 60 million loss and damage fund. So this is for these other countries. It says that it's going to be targeted towards small nations in the Pacific and Indian Oceans. Now, I want to tell you about Putin now, because this one really, hold on, let's get on to Putin and what happened here. Okay, we talked about this one already. Putin trolls COP28 with oil talks next door. Yes, this is not a joke. Putin actually flew in to the same area they were holding the conference, and he held a meeting with the sheikh. And not just that, after hosting this meeting, he then went on to Saudi to host another meeting. Absolutely 100% true. Someone asked me earlier when I was talking about it, they said, is that true? Are you just, is this really genuine? Yeah, yes, it's genuine. He was greeted. Now, compare this, by the way, with Biden, when Biden went over there. And actually when Trump went over there. It's very interesting to look at, because they're quite clear. They show who they like, who they don't like. So he was greeted with jets, horses, camels, and flags in the UAE during COP28 on a rare trip aboard. And the reason he went to UAE and why he can go to Saudi Arabia, they are not part of those 100 countries that are signed up to the, is it the ICC, where they have to arrest him if he lands on their soil. So let's see, we've got a little clip here. So this is what he had. He had this big flyby with the Russian colors. He comes in and then he meets with the sheikh first. Okay. And then if you look, I don't know if we got the pictures of all the flags, and no, I don't think we've got it on this one, but the whole thing was lined with flags. And he actually, when he traveled, he was flanked by 4 of the 35S fighter jets as well, because there was concerns that, that someone might have shot him down or something like that, and then blamed it on someone else and all this other stuff. So there was a whole thing. Here we go. This was the horses and the camels and everything else. So it was a pretty big welcoming party for him. So that tells you that it's not quite the way the media portrays it. And they say that they don't really like him. All these countries are keeping him at bay and keeping him at distance. Well, again, you can believe the media or you can believe what you see with your own eyes here. So I believe what I see with my own eyes. When it comes to the mainstream media anyway. He then went on to meet with the Saudi Crown Prince. So here was the meeting here. Yeah, so he had the meeting here. And some of the summary points then: cooperations within OPEC Plus to continue. Meetings with MBS in Moscow had been postponed because of the split that went on a little while ago. And then he met the Sheikh, as we just mentioned, UAE, oil, OPEC Plus, Gaza, Ukraine on agenda of this rare foreign trip. And this is the one that's quite interesting. Drop your comments below. What do you think about this one? I've highlighted it in orange. Putin is going to be hosting the Iranian president on Thursday. Well, we know that there's a lot of conflict, or should we say tension at the moment, between the West and Iran, predominantly as well, USA and Israel with Iran. So this is quite interesting that there's going to be a meeting there. It'll be interesting to know what comes out of that. A Saudi account of the meeting said the Crown Prince praised joint coordination between the two countries that helped remove tensions in the Middle East. Again, drop a comment below. What do you think they mean by this, helping to remove tensions in the Middle East? Again, you can see, do these look like mortal enemies to you? They don't to me. I mean, that's my opinion. Now, we also have a lot of the climate pledges that came out. Let's have a look. Let's have a look at food first, and then we'll loop back around to them. 134 nations signed the COP28 declaration, pledging transformation of food systems for climate change. So we have all of this going on as well with the food. And where is the, here we go. You know how much I like to look at all of these reports. This is a very short one. But this is the Declaration on Sustainable Agriculture, Resilient Food Systems and Climate Action. So if we go down to page 5 here, these are the countries that have signed up to it then. And the majority of you watching will be UK. There it is, number 126, 127, United States of America. And then a lot of you as well being Europe or Canada, Australia. I'm pretty sure your country that you live in is going to be on here. So almost everyone signed up to this new pledge. It's going to be interesting to see exactly what comes out of that. Kristalina, again, had a lot to say. The IMF had a huge amount to say at this meeting. And we always have to come back to the fact that the IMF is not a government organization. It's not an elected organization. This is a private bank. That's what they are. They're a private bank who lend money to countries. So it's always interesting when they get involved, especially at COP, and they give speeches and they set out policies for what the country should be doing. They're not elected. They're bankers. So when we talk about bias, I don't think it gets much more biased than that. Let's go back to the shared screen here. So 118 countries pledged to 11 terawatts by 2030 renewable target. How exactly they're going to get to that, I think that's going to be quite difficult, especially if you look at some of the stats here and you can see that all of the G20, it's not, 10% are missing their goals. No, all of the G20 is missing their goals and they don't have the infrastructure or anything like that to even connect up for 15 years. So how they're going to get there at 2030 in 6 years' time when most of the projects are a 10 to 15 year wait, I'm not exactly sure. This is why I don't buy into a lot of this stuff. We talked about the jets already. And this is a good website actually. It's called visualcapitalist.com. And I often use this on the walk and talks where I'm talking through some visual stuff that you can see on screen. And it's quite interesting to see who's on track to their 2030 renewable electricity targets. China, 28% renewables by 2030. EU, 42.5%. The US, they haven't got a percentage score. India, 40%. UK, 60%. So you can go on here. It's really interesting to see energy things and all sorts around economy and finance and the like. But you look at this. The UK said they're going to be focusing heavily on solar PV. But look what's happened here. It sort of peaked in 2018, and it hasn't really grown that much ever since. We saw some reductions. So we're not seeing this growth that they are talking about. And then if you want to look at the World Energy Outlook, this is quite an interesting report for those of you who are a bit geeky like I am. You can have a read of this. It will give you a lot of the information that you need. So a little bit shorter today going through all this, but I didn't want to go through every last nitty-gritty detail because I'm going to cover some bits on the walk and talk as well. But it's just weird to me. I don't know if you feel the same way when you start looking at all of this stuff and you look at the carbon pricing as well. That's what the IMF wants to do. They want to launch a new price on carbon. And how that they can sit there and say, oh, carbon's X per ton, whatever it is right now. Let's call it $20, right? Whatever it is. And say we need to 4x that to $80 and the citizens will pay it. And then they say, oh, yes, the citizens, they want to pay it. I still don't know any citizens that want to pay carbon fees. Like, let's say you get on an airplane and you want to go on holiday or your vacation. I have never seen anyone at the airport say, excuse me, I would love to pay that carbon thing that you charge me there. Let's say it's $100, euros, pounds. I would love to pay 4x that. I don't even think people will ever say I want to pay it in the first place. And it's not just that, it's on our electricity generation, it's on a lot of our other energy now, it's on all sorts of things. It's going to be going on to food, it's going to be going on to all sorts of things. And who controls this? Who controls all the carbon credits? Well, the IMF has some control, but they want to have the control of the system. That's what they're putting all this stuff out for, the infrastructure of the system for carbon credits. To me, it's just another form of taxation where we're seeing this extraction-based system that they want to move over to carbon next, because they say we have all these different currencies around the world, but the one thing we are all united on is carbon. So that's why I think they're going to be moving something towards carbon, because yeah, the currencies are all different, but the carbon stuff could even be its own currency in its own right that sits adjacent to the main currencies. There's a lot going on here that I still need to unpack, but I don't want to get too heavy in today's video. That's it. Thanks for watching. Take care. God bless you. I'll see you on the walk and talk tomorrow.